All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on California Universal Meals for charter schools and small districts. Everyone, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. My name is Janelle Wojcik, and I am the program manager here at LunchAssist, and we are so glad that you all could be here to join us today. All right, so first I'd like to introduce you to today's speakers. We are joined by Camille Biazzo, a school nutrition consultant here at LunchAssist. She is a former assistant director of school nutrition programs with the Montana State Agency. Hello, Camille, we're so glad you could join us. And next we have Mackenzie Lopez, the co-founder of LunchAssist and a registered dietitian who began her career at Stanford University as a sports dietitian. She spent the last 4 years supporting school nutrition professionals and navigating all things compliance. Hello, Mackenzie. And we also have Ryan Gomes, California Client Manager with School Food Solutions, where he provides compliance and admin support to school meal programs throughout California. He was previously the Director of Operations at a 6-school K-12 charter school network, where he built the school nutrition program from the ground up. Hello, Ryan. Thanks for being here. Fantastic. So a little bit more about us. We are LunchAssist. This is our beautiful team here. We work with about 400 districts nationwide through LunchAssist Pro training, resources, online courses, and one-on-one consulting services. We are made up of menu planners, chefs, registered dietitians, school nutrition directors, and former state agency reviewers. And we've been in your shoes and we've worked in school cafeterias. Our team of school nutrition nerds loves to geek out on translating complex topics into easy to understand training and resources. And we're super passionate about school nutrition and a little obsessed with school lunch heroes, like all of you on today's call. Jen, Jackie, and Mike are also on the call today, so you may see them chiming in on the chat box or during our Q&A later on in today's call. So we've recently revamped our online training portal to be a custom learning management system that tracks compliance with professional standards and includes the really fun, short, interactive training videos that our team creates, and also covers topics from civil rights to culinary skills and everything in between. And of course, all of our training is available in English and Spanish, just another way that we like to support the school nutrition community through accessible training materials. And we're really excited to be here with you today to go over California Universal Meals. And now I'll go ahead and pass things over to Ryan to tell us a little bit more about School Food Solutions.
Awesome. Thank you, Janelle. Yeah, I'd like to share a little bit more about my School Food Solutions team. Much like LunchAssist at School Food Solutions, we're all former school operators and food industry experts. We're dedicated to provide hands-on support to schools to help them both join, operate, and really stay in compliance with the NSLP program. We partner with over 200 school sites from coast to coast. We're right now in 8 states and we're growing. And then right here pictured are 4 of the happy smiling faces who are excited to support you. A little bit more about what we do. We're here to do the heavy lifting and we're here to help. So in addition to just general food service support, we're also FRL eligibility experts. I like to say we love to receive big stacks of FRL apps in the summer. If your team's sick of doing all the paperwork, let School Food Solutions help. We can do all the notification and verification as well. So no more paper cuts and folding letters for your team. All right, let me pass that back to Janelle to cover our agenda.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. So just moving on to a quick look at today's agenda. Next, I'll go ahead and hand things over to Camille and Ryan for Universal Meals 101, not one-on-one, 101. And then we'll move on to talk about summer operations with Mackenzie. And after that, we'll have a quick chat on some frequently asked questions. And finally, we'll wrap up with some tools and resources before the live Q&A, where you all can ask questions in the chat and get live answers from today's speakers. Okay, great. Now I'll pass the virtual mic over to Camille to get us started.
Thank you, Janelle. So to kick things off, let's talk a little bit about why school meals matter. All of us presenting here today work with schools, and we've all kind of noticed that a lot of schools, especially The smaller, more rural districts and charter schools have quite a few questions about universal meals. So let's explore a little bit more about why the funding process matters for universal meals, and then we'll get into a little refresher on how exactly school meals are funded. First of all, a growing number of states are adopting universal meal programs, so this will likely be a hot topic nationally for a while. And this is a big deal because according to the USDA, like you can see on this slide, about 14 million students eat breakfast. And then for lunch, you can see that there are about 30 million lunches served to students every single day. That is a lot of meals. And because of universal meals programs growing in the country, that number is likely to increase even more. So you can see so many students really depend on school meals each day, like most of you know. And to help us set the stage for the inner workings of universal meals, I'd really like to dive into how these meals are actually funded, a topic that likely impacts all of you here today in the room. So at the highest level, schools are receiving funding from the federal government or USDA, and then each year, the government determines how much money schools get back for each school meal, reimbursable meal that's served. These are called reimbursement rates. The exact amount is often connected to a student's eligibility for free or reduced price meals and whether your school operates a special provision like Provision 2 or Community Eligibility Provision, CEP. The Universal Meals Program tops off that federal reimbursement with some state money, so every meal is getting reimbursed at that free rate, regardless of how a student actually qualifies, which would be like free, reduced, or paid. So in California, that means that schools no longer have to rely on households to pay for that reduced or paid meal. If you are more of like a visual learner like me, this is really a great graphic that kind of ties everything together that I was just saying, explaining how the payment process looks like in real life. So you can see like starting off, the schools are tracking the number of reimbursable meals they serve, and then they put together a report, like a monthly claim. The school representative then enters this consolidated monthly information into the state system called CNIPS. Then the state agency looks at that, processes the information, and sends schools a combination then of that federal and state money to reimburse schools for those meals they serve to students every month. So what is that magic reimbursement number? In California, there are quite a few different like rates and funding streams that make up the school meal reimbursement rates. Like you can see here, the California state reimbursement, the Keep Kids Fed Act money. And this is, so you can see right here, this is really the total per meal amount that you've been getting this last school year. If you are currently running the school nutrition programs, you can like see this amount in your CNIPS claims section as well. If you're unsure which rate, because there's basic, severe need, all that, you can see that right in your own CNIPS. So speaking of funding, the 2022 KIT funds, the round 2 of KIT funds were just announced this last Friday, so super exciting. The goal of these KIT funds is to fund kitchen infrastructure, upgrades, equipment, food service staff training, all of that stuff to support the implementation of universal meals. You can see we just put the funding spreadsheet in the chat, I believe. So if you haven't checked on how much money you're getting yet, look at that spreadsheet. It's pretty exciting. A lot of schools are getting quite a bit of funding for this. And then if you want to know a little bit more about what you can spend that money on, there are quite a few different ways you can use the money to support your programs. Like I said, new equipment, you can pay for travel that goes along with staff training. You can see highlighted here, staff training and consultants like us, that all falls under allowable expenses for those KIT funds. All right, and finally, why are we focusing on you, small and charter schools? So first of all, this is actually a current priority for USDA right now. Small districts and charter schools, as you know, face different challenges in running the school meal programs compared to those larger districts. For example, a larger district, they might actually have like a designated buyer or procurement point of contact, whereas in a smaller school or district, the person that's in charge of procurement is also planning the menu often, or they're cooking. maybe entering in the meal claims for reimbursement. So you often wear a lot of hats in those smaller districts. So it can be pretty tough to really meet all of the same federal program requirements as the larger districts with greater resources. If your district is looking for some additional funding to help you with those challenges that come along with serving healthy school meals, USDA actually recently provided some funding to Action for Healthy Kids in partnership with the Chef Ann Foundation to put out the Healthy Meals Incentive Grant for smaller school districts. I'm sure a lot of you have been seeing this advertised. I think CDE has put it in some advertising emails as well. So check that out if you're interested. And then if that doesn't quite fit your school's needs, be on the lookout in the next 6 months for more opportunities. Actually, LunchAssist and Boise State will also be coming out with a grant through USDA for small, rural, and charter schools. So be on the lookout for that as well. And that wraps up my section. So I'm going to hand it off to Ryan to really dig into those inner workings of universal meals.
Thank you. All right, so let's talk universal meals in California. So starting this school year, so 22-23, all public school districts, county offices of ed, and charter schools that serve grades TK through 12 must provide 2 meals free of charge during each school day to students that request a meal. And this is regardless of their free or reduced price meal eligibility, meaning we offer them to everyone. And there are 2, the meals are specific. It is breakfast and lunch we have to offer. So a question we get a lot, and bad news, is snack or supper, although you could still offer those, do not count towards the state meal mandate or the universal meal requirement. In addition, the meals offered must satisfy the NSLP school breakfast program meal pattern, even if the LEA is not participating in those programs. And so I think that's one of the main reasons we have this call today is, since the requirement in California is for all of the schools above to meet the USDA meal pattern, why not get paid back for doing it, right? I think that every school would appreciate the extra bucks in their pocket. And regardless of the money, there's a lot of other reasons to participate in the Universal Meals Program. This is increasing your participation. I always say it's easier to do everything at scale. You're increasing access to food to your students. You're using nutrition to increase or improve learning and education outcomes. One of my favorites from years past is eliminating the unpaid meal balances, because no one likes to send our families an invoice. And there's plenty of more reasons to join the program. This is a sweeping change. This is a really big change that applies to almost everyone, but there are a few exceptions. So who does universal meals not apply to? So if you're a non-classroom based charter school, you still must comply with the original state meal mandate. So this is the one to require a free, nutritionally adequate breakfast or lunch to your needy pupils when they're scheduled for educational activities lasting 2 hours or longer on a school site, resource center, or satellite facility. This would include your testing weeks when you're in person. The rules also apply to distance learners, but only when they're on campus receiving instruction. And finally, the universal meals does not apply to private schools. All right. Next, I've talked to a lot of schools over the past few years, and so I get some of the same questions. So I want to talk through some of the common scenarios that impact a lot of us. So first, one of the questions I get is, what if my school doesn't participate in the NSLP or school breakfast program? Does this apply to us? And the answer is still yes. The state meal mandate will apply to all LEA or all public schools, county offices of ed, and charter schools. However, as mentioned, only the LEAs participating in the NSLP or school breakfast program are eligible to receive the state reimbursement. So you can't even get the extra state dollars that are put towards this program without participating in the USDA program first. So at this point, if you're still not an SFA, this may be the reason to become one, because this is the only path to receiving those reimbursements. All right. Another question that's very common is, what about our shortened school days? Do we still need to offer both of the meals? And again, the answer is yes. And I realize this is challenging, that both breakfast and lunch must be offered regardless of your school schedule. And so one of the common scenarios here is half-day TK and kinder. So here's an option that you can make work is additional meal periods don't need to be scheduled for those half-day programs, but the students still should be allowed on campus for the meals served outside of their school schedule. So for example, your AM breakfast service is all you need to meet the universal meal requirement. But what you'll want to make sure is that you're ready to welcome your afternoon learners on campus to eat in the morning. Remember, it's still a congregate setting that you must serve these meals in, at least for now. I think one of the things I want to put on everyone's radar is Assembly Bill 348. This is from Senator Skinner. This bill would allow schools to offer non-congregate, so grab and go style feeding for one meal on school days for 4 hour school days. Now, this is still pending from the USDA, but this could be a really convenient change for the program. All right, on that note, let me pass the mic back over to Mackenzie to talk about summer school, because I'm sure you have questions there.
Thanks, Ryan. Yes, so some of you are probably gearing up and looking ahead towards the next few months and wondering how universal meals mandate affects summer meal service. Well, in short, SFAs must comply with the state meal mandate for summer school, which includes incoming kindergartners, extended school year or ESY, and Saturday school. Now in California, there are a couple of options for this. We're going to review the most common pathways that we see districts and charter schools implementing for summer meal service. The first one is running all of your meals through NSLP and school breakfast program like you would during the normal school year. So if you are only planning to serve meals to students who are actively enrolled in academic summer school programs, you can serve them through the NSLP. A quick tip, if you're unsure whether the summer meal program counts as a true academic day, is to find out if average daily attendance dollars are collected. You might also know them as ADA dollars. If average daily attendance dollars are collected for those days that the students are on campus in the summer, then those count as academic days. In that case, you can run the meals through NSLP and school breakfast program for the students who are enrolled in those summer programs. Now, if ADA dollars are not collected, then we'll talk about our second option here in just a moment. So the other option is available to area eligible SFAs who have summer programs, but let's say they're operated and they're not academic days. In that case, something like the seamless summer option might be a pathway to explore. And so with this option, you do need to be area eligible, which means that you do need to have at least 50% free or reduced price meals or rates in your area. And there's a few different ways to qualify for area eligibility. So if anyone has any questions, just let us know. But this is a really great option if you are wanting to serve students or children who are not necessarily enrolled. So this allows it to be open to the community and for programs that do not qualify for academic days. Now we have a little bit of a cheat sheet for you here because summer meal programs can get a bit confusing. So there are, like I mentioned, there's the NSLP, there's a school breakfast program. You can run it through those programs for summer meal service. You can also run SSO. And then some of you may also have ELOP programs operating in the summer, and these are a little bit different. So we do have a chart and a really great resource available to you in the downloadable resource that we shared in the chat. And in this resource, it outlines exactly who's eligible, how you would claim the meals, what types of meals may be served, and what types of menus might be available as options for your summer meal programs. And a couple of notes about ELOP, which I just mentioned, that is technically by itself not an academic summer school program. However, you may be able to serve ELOP students if you do have academic summer school at the same site. So if anyone has some of those questions, save them for our Q&A at the end, and we can revisit some of those different scenarios and what that might look like for you. All right. One last thing, No Kid Hungry has grant funding opportunities available for rural districts or charters that are opting to do non-congregate services this summer. And their grant covers things like staffing, marketing, outdoor, indoor kitchen equipment, and some other costs associated with running a summer meal program. So if you are interested in this funding, we'll put the information for you in the chat. And you can contact Janelle Williams-Pagan from the No Kid Hungry team. I believe she's on the call today. Hi, Janelle. Thanks for sharing this funding opportunity with us. We'll be sure to share that in the chat. And now I'm going to pass it back to Janelle to go through some of our FAQs.
Great. Thank you so much to Mackenzie and Ryan and Camille for all of this super helpful information and your vast knowledge of these topics. So as Mackenzie said, now we're going to take a few minutes to go through some of our frequently asked questions. So first, how do I stay in compliance? Now, we all know there's plenty for SFAs to think about for their programs. Mackenzie, can you tell us how to stay in compliance with all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to keep track of when it comes to compliance, whether you're operating the normal school year or summer school. There are definitely a lot of hoops to jump through. So we've put together a list of resources that you'll want to check and make sure your program has. These are all policies and procedures that you should, in most cases, have on file. So things like a HACCP plan, an internal control procedures, a meal charge policy. Some of these may not be applicable. So for example, smart snacks policy would only be applicable if you serve smart snacks or California competitive foods. Same with the supper policy, that would only be applicable if you operate the CACFP program. But what we did was we organized the policies and procedures most commonly required by most SFAs and organize them here for you on this slide. So that's one thing you can do this summer or in the next couple of months here to assess how in compliance your department is. Do you have all of these policies on hand? Are they updated? Do they include the most recent policy language provided by the CDE or USDA? And if not, we have templates for all of these on our LunchAssist Pro website. So if your policy needs an update, or if you're missing one, or just want to see if the policy you have matches the required language put forth by the state or the federal government, just take a look at some of the resources we have on our website. Otherwise, this is a really great checklist to just assess your level of compliance. And do you have one of these policies in place for each of these subjects?
Great. Thank you so much, Mackenzie. Yes, as Mackenzie mentioned, we have templates, for everything on LunchAssist Pro. We also have our monthly compliance checklist that we release via our weekly newsletter. So it's so great to see this nice clean list here. All right, next up, are meal applications still required? This is also a great question. Mackenzie, would you want to go over this one as well?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And basically it depends is the answer. So if you are operating a provision, either provision 2 or community eligibility provision, otherwise known as CEP, that'll depend on whether or not you do meal applications. So many of you might have recently converted to CEP for universal meals. If you're on CEP, then no meal applications are required, and they're not even allowed, actually. So if you're on CEP, no meal applications. Now, if you're on district-wide provision 2, you may do meal applications for your base year and then have several years where you do no meal applications. For anyone that has questions about provision 2, we can go into that a little bit more if needed. But With provision 2, in most cases, it's just going to be the first year that you'll collect meal applications. Now, if you are not on a provision, if you're just doing standard claiming by free, reduced, and paid, then yes, you do still need to collect meal applications this year and every year after, even though all meals are reimbursed at the free rate. And this is something that can be a little bit confusing, and it's confusing for SFAs and confusing for parents and families as well, because it might seem counterintuitive to be filling out a meal application when the meals are provided for free, but it's really important for securing funding and kind of figuring out where those funds are coming from, if they're coming from the state or the federal government. So if you are not on a provision, then you do still need to do meal applications. If you are on a provision, you may need to do them for the first year if you're provision 2, and then if you're on CEP, no meal applications. We also have a chart comparing the different meal claiming methods. So we have the standard claiming by free, reduced, and paid, provision 2, and community eligibility provision. We have it's about a 3-page chart included in the resources for this call. Here, where the orange boxes, you can see the section about specifically meal applications and alternative income forms, but the resource as a whole is really helpful in determining which of those categories you fall into, or which one you might want to apply for if you are looking to apply for a provision. So definitely check out our resources. We have a chart there for you with more information about each of these meal claiming methods.
Great, thank you so much, Mackenzie. So moving on to our next frequently asked question, do districts still need a point of sale or POS? Ryan, I think this is a great question for you. Would you mind taking this one?
Yeah, happy to chime in. Absolutely. Yes, they do. So I tell people free meals does not mean a free for all. We still need to track what we serve. A school can only be reimbursed for the meals they serve. The school needs to take an accurate count of the complete and compliant meals that pass through their line. And so in most cases, depending on your provision programs, but you're going to be tracking these by name and eligibility type, and that's how you're going to submit your claim. So having a place to keep and record that data is really important. There's many ways to do this, but ultimately we always recommend a dedicated software product that syncs to your student information system. I like to say smooth food service starts with good data. And so these POS systems are designed to accommodate the NSLP requirements. They allow your students to self-identify. And more simply stated, a POS helps your line move quickly, right? So kids can get their food and get to lunch. In addition, I think you'll thank yourself at the end of the month when it comes time to consolidate and submit your claim for reimbursement. Few of my pro tips that I want to share today is make sure your POS, whether it's a paper or electronic system, is at the end of your food service line. That is a USDA rule. We always want to check our meal counts against our daily service to make sure we're not claiming more meals than we actually served. And we save our records, right? There's a lot of paperwork in this program, and we keep it for 3+ years or until your next audit, whatever's longer.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ryan. Moving on, what if we don't have a kitchen? Now, this is a great question because, as we all know, the setup and equipment can really vary from district to district. Mackenzie, what kind of meal service options are there for folks that don't have a kitchen?
Yeah, this is a great question. It's one we've been receiving from a variety of folks, from folks that are looking to just, start an SFA if they hadn't done meal service before, to programs who have been doing some sort of meal service already. So on the screen here, we do have a little bit of a spectrum to illustrate the different ways that you can serve meals to students. So on one end, we have vended meals where the food is provided from an outside vendor, and that could be a company, and it could be all of your meals, or it could be occasional meals, like, for example, some pizzas from Domino's or Papa John's. That's commonly seen either for specialty days or in the case of a lot of charter schools and small districts without a kitchen. Vended meals is a really great option, is to have someone else cook and prepare, deliver your meals for you. Next would be heat and serve, and this does require some kitchen equipment. This is probably the simplest form of cooking meals, where you purchase food that's already been prepared and you basically are reheating it or defrosting it and serving it to students. And that's the heat and serve individually wrapped. So a couple options there. Next, we have speed scratch and scratch cooking at the other end of the spectrum. And this is where you're preparing the meals from scratch or nearly from scratch. So for example, let's say that pizza that you had delivered from a vendor, instead of having it delivered, you're preparing the pizza using a pre-made crust and adding your own sauce and toppings. Or in the example of scratch cooking, you're making the dough yourself and topping it with your own sauce and toppings. So there is a spectrum. One is not necessarily better than another. It just depends on what facilities are available to you, what equipment you have, what your labor looks like, what your budget looks like. There are a lot of factors that go into this. So there are options. And I know, Ryan, you work with schools quite a bit too on getting them set up with the vended meals, if you want to speak to anything about vended options.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the common question is, but I don't have a kitchen. And there's a lot of facilities that don't, or you're in a sort of you're sharing a facility without access to the program. And so a vended meal model can really be a solution for schools with limited space. What you'll need on site is just a hand washing sink and a health permit. And a vendor can take care of the vended heat and serve end of that spectrum. So it could be something very simple for just cold meals, or they could do hot delivery, or even bringing items for you to heat and serve. So again, depending on your area, you'll have more. It could depend on your options, but there's usually something for everyone around California.
Great, thank you both. Yeah, that's a really good visual to sort of see all the various options. All right, finally, if someone is not already an SFA, how can they become an SFA? Ryan, would you like to take this one for us?
Happy to. Hopefully we convinced everyone on the call to become an SFA.
Yeah.
I think that's then you get control of your program and you get those reimbursements and you get access to those grants and things like that. And so step one is you got to raise your hand and say you want to do it. So reach out to the CDE and contact your county's S&P specialist. They can't start, they're the ones that are going to guide you through the application process, but they can't start until they know who you are. So reach out to them. Second step is they'll reply back with some paperwork. This is going to be some basic questions. So you'll want to have a few things handy, like your 501c3 letter and your DUNS number, or even if you don't have that yet, go get started and apply for that. Third step is internally, you want to evaluate. So thinking back to the slide before, you want to think about what sort of food program you both want and can potentially support. And so that's going to be identifying your, what equipment you may need to procure, what sort of space you have, how to get a health, do you have a health permit, or what are you going to need to do to get health permit, and really kind of where your limitations at. You're going to want to know that up front because it'll come back again. Step 4, did I mention paperwork? So there is going to be a lot more. There's both a full paper packet or digital PDF packet, as well as an online packet that you're going to submit to the CDE. There'll be some back and forth there. And that's something that you'll work on kind of parallel paths as you move on to step 5. This is going to be determining where you're going to get your food from. So are you going to procure a vendor or a food service management company? Are you going to do scratch preparation? And if so, what are you buying? What's your menu going to be? Step 6, obtain that health permit. I probably should have put step 6 as step 1. This is something is very important. You cannot get approved by the CDE, so don't drag your feet on this one. Start early and make sure your site can qualify and have a permitted space. As you move on to step 7, the CDE will need to approve your menu. So by step 7, you're going to want to have your vendor selected or your menu determined so that you can submit everything to CDE and receive your approval. If you're using a vendor model, this is something that that company will help you with, at least part of this step. Then from there, the CDE will review everything, and you should be approved to serve and get reimbursed for meals. My pro tip is start early, ask questions, stay organized, and follow up frequently. This could be a 4 to 6 month process, and there are a lot of moving pieces here. And so, you want to just really stay organized, because you don't get the money until you get the approval. If I tried to break it down simply, if this sounds overwhelming, and it really is, let's talk later. School Food Solutions can help you with this whole process from start to finish. All right, Janelle, I've said enough. I'll hand it back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ryan and Mackenzie, for going over those frequently asked questions. I think that was really helpful. So before we move on to our Q&A portion of today's call, I just want to let everyone know that we'll be sending out a recap email, which will contain a recording of today's webinar and lots of great resources, including the ones shown during today's presentation. And today is just a glimpse of what we offer here at LunchAssist. If you haven't already signed up for the LunchAssist newsletter, it's a great way to stay in touch with us. We're always sending out fun little memes and silly jokes, and squeezing in some policy updates and training and more great resources in between. And as we mentioned, we also include our monthly compliance checklists in those as well. If you found today's presentation and all these resources helpful, we have so much more available with our LunchAssist Pro membership, including online training and professional standards tracking that I mentioned earlier. We also have over 700 more resources like these, including templates and cheat sheets, and so much more that can help you all stay in compliance. And our consulting services take what we offer through LunchAssist Pro one step further by providing monthly check-ins and one-on-one conversations with our team of consultants who are former school nutrition directors, dietitians, and former state agency staff. As they say, but wait, there's more. LunchAssist services are, in fact, allowable uses of the cafeteria fund and kit funds. So that's definitely something to celebrate. Ryan, before we jump into the Q&A, would you like to just tell us a bit more about what School Food Solutions can offer the community and other school nutrition professionals on today's call?
Yeah, I'd love to, absolutely. So here's our whole list of services. We start to finish, we can step in and support. And so I always tell folks that starting a food service program is like adopting a puppy, in the sense that the adoption is the easy part. It's the puppy care that is the real challenge, and what can get difficult. And that's really where School Food Solutions can step in, is providing that care, support, training, and thought partnering throughout the implementation and just the ongoing operation of your food service program. We can help you from that lengthy SFA application through your food service audit, which is probably going to happen in your first year, not your second year of operation. We can do all of that for you. We're especially knowledgeable, just because most of our team came from the charter space. We're especially knowledgeable with facility limitations and challenges. We know what it's like to try to, you get a charter for your school, and then you need to find a place to put it. And so I can tell you, I've put a permitted kitchen in a closet before, so I'm sure we can help you with your limited space as well. Thanks, Janelle.
Absolutely. Isn't it Tim Gunn that says make it work, right? Ryan can make it work.
Exactly.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much, Ryan. Okay, so now we can move on to our Q&A portion of today's call for the next few minutes here. And if you have any questions for our guests today, just go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll get to them. We're going to begin with some of the questions that have already come through. We have our first question here from Rodrigo. What if we are under a provision or a CEP? Are we required to add correct eligibility since we do not collect lunch applications? Ryan, Mackenzie, Camille, anybody want to grab that one?
I can jump in there. Yeah. So with CEP, you actually, as Mackenzie said, you can't do lunch applications. In California, you may still be using an alternative income form to determine your eligibility or your income eligibility for other programs, but not for the lunch program. And so when you submit your claim, you'll be submitting those based on your determined CEP percentage. And I believe that's, if you're thinking about opting into CEP, that process is happening now and buttoning up at the end of June.
Yeah, and also Rodrigo, if I'm not sure what you mean by are we required to add correct area or correct eligibility? So if we're missing your question or not answering it correctly, just let us know. It looks like I think we've got Jen here screen sharing.
Yeah, I was just gonna share this chart again because this is if you click on that resources document we put in the chat, it'll link to this. So it's like that document has all the resources shared, and you click on the button here for California Universal Meals Comparison Chart. That'll kind of walk you through, like Mackenzie kind of had a screenshot of it on the slide. But this is super helpful because it is very confusing what the requirements are across the different programs. Like if you offer community eligibility provision versus provision 2 versus just regular standard meal counting. But in light of universal meals, right? Because there's just layers and layers of policies and rules. So you can check this out and kind of go down the different options and see what is required. And of course, I think one thing, I don't know now, I can't remember if we mentioned this, but if a school is at least 40%, if at least 40% of the students are identified students, which means that they're directly certified, or homeless, migrant, all those kind of categories, then that school site must participate in Provision 2 or CEP. So if you have if you only have one school, then that's easy. You have to participate in either CEP and Provision 2, and usually CEP is a little easier to participate in. But if you have multiple schools, this chart can really help you kind of decide what you want to do, because chances are at least one school would have to participate if it's at that 40%. So then you kind of have to decide what you want to do with your other schools. And something that is really interesting that not everyone, I think, realizes is that Provision 2, there's no minimum free and reduced or direct certification number to participate. So that can also be something, if you have, let's say you have 2 schools and only one meets the CEP threshold, you actually might want to consider opting into Provision 2 so that you have the same type of system for both schools, because there's no minimum requirement to participate in Provision 2. So there's lots of pros and cons, and this chart is basically our brain dump of the things we know about them.
Thanks, Jen.
Yes, thank you so much. Our next question comes from Vicky. Our summer school is more of an enrichment program. Do we still need to offer meals?
So you're not required to under the universal meals mandate. You're only required to provide the 2 meals per day for those academic days. However, if you want to provide meals, that's where you can look into options like SSO, but it's not required if it's enrichment only.
Although it may be required if it's ELOP enrichment. So that's where if you have, it's a little bit tricky there. And then that's where we have another chart. Do you notice a theme here? It's not just you all that are not understanding this stuff. We get confused too. So we make charts in Canva. So this chart is also on your resources document. And if you're trying to figure out, does my summer program, what do I have to do with this summer program? Come on, people, it's so confusing. So you can follow the different charts here. So you've got universal meals mandate in summer, that would apply more to your ESY program. You got your SSO, just your basic seamless summer, when and how you can operate that. And then you got ELOP, which is only for schools that have TK through 6. Even if you have ELOP, you may not have ELOP during the summer, but a lot of people are having ELOP in the summer, and that's just a California thing as well. It's a new thing. So this second page has kind of more, it's sort of all the same, but different, is it allowed, not allowed? So this will help you answer some of those questions. Yeah, that's where you can always reach out to any of us too, if you're have little questions here and there. And then this is something that both School Food Solutions and LunchAssist does with our one-on-one consulting clients. We will dig right into this and really help you find the answer, but you're always welcome to send us an email too. We're happy to help. So yeah, it's a lot going on this year.
Great, thank you. Our next question comes from May. We have an academic summer school, but I do not believe we collect ADA on it. Am I required to serve meals?
So I think Jen, you started to comment this in the chat already, right?
Yeah, so if it's an academic summer school, usually they do collect ADA. So you might just want to make sure, just because, just, it never hurts to double, triple check. Like, okay, are you sure? Like, ask the right people, make sure. So if they're not collecting ADA dollars, then there could be like, it may be sort of like an academic program, but it's technically nested as enrichment. Then ask if it's ELOP. So academic ESY, if they're collecting ADA, you have to meet the state meal mandate. That's basically a school day. Extended school year is a school day. And so the universal meals mandate applies. Enrichment, like Mackenzie was saying, it may or may not. So enrichment, there's no USDA requirement to do meals. However, you may, if it's ELOP does have a requirement that meals should be offered, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's breakfast or lunch. And there's very complicated things that you can do or not do. So that's where that chart is helpful. So if it's more like, I think we had one the other day that was kids were doing some testing Saturday, right? And we were like, what is this? Is this academics? Is this a Saturday school? And so we just had to ask, like, is ADA being collected? And then if not, is this ELOP? And then if not, then you probably don't have to offer meals. So if it's not ELOP and it's not academic ADA dollars being collected, ADA stands for average daily attendance dollars that the schools collect from the state. So if they're not getting ELOP funds, they're not getting attendance dollars, then probably not. And hopefully that chart is helpful. And like I said, if you're still confused, just give us a ring, we'll help you.
Jen, to tag on to that too. So ELOP is like a separate program, right? And like it's a separate requirement of that program to serve some food to those children. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that food has to come from the SFA, right, Jen? So like that program needs to get some food there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the school, the SFA meal program has to provide that snack or that meal to ELOP. So does that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like, even though ELOP, in the ELOP manual, it says that meals need to be provided during ELOP, they should be under the reimbursable programs where possible. But for instance, if your program is not operating, your vendor is not available, your staff isn't available to work, and it's just an ELOP program that your school nutrition department is not able to provide, that is technically fine. You're not in the wrong. But the school, like the ed services folks, probably don't want to hear this, but they need to figure that out. So they could do like a catering, they can pay for meals out of the ELOP funds. So there's, that's where it gets into, whose responsibility is it? Chances are we're the food people. They're going to turn to us and be like, hey, we need food. You do food. Can you do our food? So, you might not be able to wiggle your way out of that one, but it's, just something to be aware of. And like I said before, it's like layers and layers of different regulations and how they all mesh together. And so, good luck. And hopefully you have a kind of a team approach that you can bounce these ideas off of. And again, that's why we like these little charts, because it does help you kind of sit down. So those are something you can also share with your CBO or your ed services folks to be like, okay, here's the layers of regulations. Now let's figure out a plan for our school and our students and what's going to work for our school community.
I've got one other thing to chime in there, Jen, is, for our vended schools out there, you've already built a relationship with your school vendor. And so even if you're not intending on claiming these, so even if it's not mandated, but you still want to support the rest of your team with providing food, I mean, your vendor's in the business of selling food. So, they may still be willing to provide it, separately, just ask for a separate invoice to go to whoever's running your ELOP program. But you've already built the infrastructure to receive and serve food. And so even if you're not looking to get reimbursement from it, so if you're giving your staff the summer off, you can still help the rest of your team out and at least, kind of provide them your contact of your vended meal model. I think that's always a great option of, you can still utilize your vendor to receive food. It just doesn't need to be programmatic and reimbursable.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. So this next one, I believe, was answered in the chat, but just in case anyone missed it, I'll go ahead and just go over it, and maybe others have something to add. Our special ed ESY is based on regression recoupment analysis, and that the student is at risk for skill regression. Do we need to provide meals in this case? I believe the answer is yes. ESY is usually a school day, correct? Cool. All right, great. Moving on, another question we have from Kelly. Will you be going over SFBP funding, specifically how to go about it if we have vended meals?
Yeah, I can take this one, Janelle. So just a brief overview of the School Food Best Practices Fund. So this is a non-competitive option that schools can opt into. And if we can, maybe somebody can pop that opt-in into the chat real quick. I believe the deadline is coming up May 15th to opt into this funding source. And it's a base award amount of about I think $50,000, and then they give you some extra money based on the remaining funds according to your student enrollment and then number of free and reduced. So, but baseline, if you opt into it, you would get $50,000. So that's exciting. And then what you can use the money on, it says procuring California grown or produced, sustainably grown, whole or minimally processed foods is one option. Using those California grown, whole or minimally processed foods and plant-based or restricted diet meals for students, procuring plant-based or restricted diet meals for students is another option, or freshly preparing meals on site. So there's a few different ways you could use the funds, and you don't have to use them for all four. They're kind of four options for how you can use those funds. And then for vended meals specifically, so I actually looked this up on the CDE's Q&A. I was like, is there any specific thing according to vended meals? So on their website, they say that you can use the School Food Best Practices funds on procuring plant-based or restricted diet meals from meal vendors. And you can't use the funds on non-plant-based foods or non-restricted meals from food vendors. So I don't know if anyone has anything else to add on to working with their vendor for using the money on that. You can also, if you use a food service management company, you can use those funds also if you're currently contracting with a management company, as long as that management company is procuring California grown, produced, or sustainably grown, minimally processed foods for those meal programs. So feel free anyone else to jump in if you have more information on working with your vendor and using these funds.
Great.
I can chime in briefly just to say that I think it's working with your vendors. The key word there is I would ask them, because ultimately as the SFA, you're the one that's going to receive the money, and they're also the one that if it's turns out to be non-compliant, you're the one that they're going to ask to pay it back. And so I would vended meals is usually tough to access with, or these funds with, but not impossible. So it's case by case. I would work closely with the vendor and then make sure you're comfortable, that's meeting both the letter and the spirit of the guidance.
Perfect. Thank you. And so far, it looks like the last question we have here, maybe this is something you could go over real quick, Ryan, in relation to Skinner's proposed bill, AB 348. Someone was asking, just for sort of clarification, that would that bill mean that on a minimum day they're only required to offer breakfast? I see it was sort of answered in the chat there, but maybe you could just go over it one more time to sort of clarify what that would mean.
Yes. So obviously still very much in the works. And so who knows what the final form may look like. My understanding is that it would mean that you would still offer two meals. One of them could be offered as a grab and go. And so what my interpretation of this is, so for example, on your minimum days, where you're trying to dismiss at say 12:30, you're not also then having to either extend the day or extend supervision to provide a congregate feeding setting. You can then put a brown bag of lunch out, have a choice of milk, and wish the kids a wonderful short day. And so that is, I believe, what it's looking at now. So you'd still do two meals. You'd have flexibility how you serve them.
Okay, great. Thank you. I see another one that came in through here. Another question, ELOP meals do not need tracking since it's not part of NSLP or universal meals. Is that correct?
I'll just speak to that. Oh, Jen, if you can take that one if you want. I think it depends though on how if you are claim those meals or not, because you technically can claim ELOP meals if you are running your meal service through NSLP or the school breakfast program in the summertime. If ELOP is taking place at a site that is claiming average daily attendance dollars, then you could run all those meals through NSLP and school breakfast program. In that case, if you're submitting those meals for reimbursement, then yes, you would want to track them. But that might not be the case. So Jen, I'll let you chime in.
Yeah, exactly. You definitely want to track your ELOP meals if you're claiming them. So your standard meal counting and claiming kind of rules, right? So tally sheets, menu production records, things like that, rosters, however it works at your school or district. If you're just doing like, if they're not being claimed and it's more of a catering, you would still want to be following, like if you're catering and someone there from the nutrition department, you still do have some sort of like accounting, like general accounting practices to account for, right? Because if they're coming out of the food services fund, then they need to be invoiced to the department, and then that invoice needs to be paid and it gets tracked and nested under your non-program foods. If it's not coming from the nutrition department and it's not being claimed, let's say like Ryan was suggesting, maybe your school vendor is going to sell meals, but they're going to put them on a separate invoice and they're just going to vend, like, let's say you work with Revolution Foods. Revolution Foods is just going to vend directly to Ed Services, and they're going to invoice Ed Services or like the ELOP program. And you're never going to see that invoice. It's not going to, the money's not going to come out of your account. You're not going to pay it, nothing like that. Then that's great. You don't have to touch that. So then there'd be no tracking, but just be careful on that. If any of that money is coming through your account, or if you're doing any of the work, there's kind of either those general accounting practices, or if you're claiming, then for sure you got layers and layers of rules to follow.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then there's another question in here. Can we use USDA commodities when vending to NPS?
Oh, NPS is a non-public school.
Okay.
Did you have to ask a commodity question? Like, seriously, I've been in school food for over 10 years and it still makes my brain hurt when I think about commodities.
I saw that too. I was hoping we might skip that one. So I did a little digging. I think ultimately this is talking to the CDE. I mean, I think the other question is who's the food going to, because you can claim those meals, right? One of the challenges is then you're adding them as one of your service. I mean, I guess vending would be different. I think it would depend on the relationship, but at some point, if those were going to be reimbursable meals, that might be your claiming site. It may depend on what kids are receiving those meals. I think it's definitely challenging. Doesn't sound impossible, but I think you'd want real clarity with the commodities team.
Right, like Brian was saying, it's kind of like a difference of like, yeah, are you like vending meals and they're part of their own thing, or are they nested under you, like in the agreement in the CNIPS, right? So that relationship really does matter with how you use your USDA foods.
Okay, great, thank you.
Don't you just love when answers get answered with an "it depends"?
Yes. And just wanted to comment that Abby commented there in the chat about SB 348 with a little bit of additional information there. So thank you for that, Abby. And then our last question here, kind of rewinding back over to summer school. For summer school, we are paying our employees through ELOP. How can we get reimbursed for breakfast and lunches? I think Mackenzie kind of talked on that a second ago.
Yeah, so if the ELOP program is operating at a site where you are claiming breakfast and lunch through NSLP and school breakfast program, so again, a site where you're claiming $88, then those meals for ELOP could also, like the ELOP students could have access to those breakfast and lunch meals. That's one way. The other way is if you are operating as an area eligible SSO site, seamless summer option. then really the main thing here is that you just need to make sure that you qualify to be area eligible. In that case, you could claim the ELOP meals under your SSO program.
And there are a couple different ways that you can run the summer program if you qualify for the summer program. Like Mackenzie said, if you could do like an open site, which you'd have to qualify under, like area eligibility, or if you did, there's also the option of doing like closed enrolled for ELOP, and that's a little bit more like, there are a little bit more like hoops to jump through to become a closed enrolled site. So I would recommend you look at our chart again to see if that makes sense for your school. But yeah, it just depends on if they are eligible for SSO. Like they have to have high enough free and reduced in order to run that program. If they're not also running like an academic program where you would claim them under NSLP.
Okay, great. Another question came in from Serena. We are doing a non-academic ELOP program for a couple weeks this summer and are a TK to 6. The principal has seen information that we don't have to offer meals, but now it seems like we do. We won't be getting ADA and just aren't set up to run SSO. Our facilities are too small. Do we in fact have to offer meals?
Yeah, so in that case, it defers back to ELOP program regulations. So it's not necessarily universal meals that's requiring you to serve foods, but ELOP has some regulations there. And those foods don't necessarily need to go through the food service department. The ELOP program will just need to make sure that they're in compliance with the ELOP guidelines, and that's in that case.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Oh yeah, and then Jen just put the ELOP guidelines there in the chat for everyone. So that's all the questions we have for today, unless anyone has anything else that they'd like to add or chime in about. Now's the time. Otherwise, we just want to thank everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And we hope you have a good week, and we hope to see you all next time.